The hospital room was eerily silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor that had been a constant soundtrack to Jenna Matthews' life for the past 3 weeks. The once vibrant woman had been found lifeless in her home, her heart stopped and her body cold. Paramedics had performed CPR for 20 excruciating minutes before bringing her back, but she never regained consciousness. Her family and friends had gathered around her bedside, praying, crying, and hoping for a miracle. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. Then, without warning, Jenna's eyes flew open. She gasped deeply as though she had been submerged underwater and was now breaking through to the surface. Nurses rushed to her side, alarms blaring, and her family looked on in stunned silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw and filled with a chilling urgency. "You have to listen to me," she rasped. "I've seen what's coming." At first, they thought she was delirious, a side effect of her prolonged cardiac arrest and the trauma her body had endured. But as she began to recount her experience, the room fell into a hushed awe. Jenna claimed she had been dead, not in a dream, not in a state of unconsciousness, but in a place beyond comprehension. She had experienced death, and she had returned with a message. Jenna described a realm of indescribable beauty and terrifying consequence. She had seen a brilliant light, warmer and more welcoming than anything she had ever known. In the light, she felt peace and love, but it wasn't long before the light was overshadowed by a voice. The voice was neither male nor female. It seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was gentle yet commanding, and it spoke of the rapture. "You were shown this because you must warn them," the voice had told her. Jenna said she was then pulled through what felt like a vortex, descending into a scene that she could only describe as apocalyptic. She saw cities crumbling, people vanishing into thin air, and chaos consuming the earth. Those who were left behind screamed in anguish, their faces twisted with regret and fear. The voice explained that the rapture was near, closer than anyone dared to believe. It spoke of a time when those who were faithful and prepared would be taken, spared from the horrors to come. Those who remained would face trials beyond imagination. Jenna was shown images of wars, natural disasters, and a rising darkness that seemed to consume everything good and pure. "It wasn't just a dream," she told her family with wide, tear-filled eyes. "It was real. I could feel it, smell it, taste the ash in the air. I was there." Her husband, David, tried to comfort her, but his words felt hollow. "It's okay, Jenna. You've been through a lot. Maybe your mind is playing tricks on you." "No!" she snapped, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. I saw it. It's coming, and we're not ready." Word of Jenna's experience spread quickly. Within days, her story was being shared online, and people from all over the world began reaching out to her. Some were skeptics, accusing her of fabricating her tale for attention. Others were believers, convinced that Jenna had been chosen as a modern-day prophet. Jenna herself was neither comfortable nor eager to take on such a role, but she felt an unshakable obligation to share what she had seen. She began speaking at churches, community centers, and even on radio programs. Her message was always the same: prepare your hearts and souls because the time is near. She spoke of repentance, forgiveness, and the importance of faith. "We can't stop what's coming," she would say, her voice trembling with emotion, "but we can be ready for it." Jenna's vivid descriptions of the rapture and its aftermath captivated and terrified her audiences. She spoke of how people would simply vanish in an instant, their clothes and belongings left behind as they ascended to a place of eternal peace. But for those who remained, it would be a time of unimaginable suffering. The world would be plunged into darkness, both literal and metaphorical. The sun would be obscured and the air would grow thick with smoke and ash. Natural disasters would strike with relentless fury. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and storms of fire. Governments would collapse and chaos would reign. But worst of all, a malevolent force would rise, deceiving and enslaving the remnants of humanity. Jenna's accounts were so detailed, so haunting, that even the most cynical listeners found themselves unnerved. She described encounters with beings she could only refer to as angels and demons. The angels, she said, were unlike the serene, benevolent figures often depicted in art. They were fierce and commanding, warriors of light who carried an aura of divine authority. The demons, on the other hand, were terrifying in their grotesque and shadowy forms. They thrived on fear and despair, preying on those who had lost hope. Jenna's family struggled to adjust to their new reality. Her teenage daughter Emily felt alienated at school as classmates whispered about her mother being the crazy rapture lady. David tried to shield Jenna from the harshest criticisms, but even he found it hard to reconcile the woman he had known with the one who now seemed consumed by her visions. "You're scaring people," he told her one night. "Maybe you need to take a step back." "I can't," Jenna replied, her eyes glistening with tears. "You didn't see what I saw. You didn't hear the screams or feel the fire. If I don't warn them, their blood will be on my hands." Despite the strain on her relationships, Jenna's conviction never wavered. She began to notice changes in herself, subtle at first but impossible to ignore. Her senses seemed heightened. She could hear whispers that no one else could and see shadows moving in the corners of her vision. She started having vivid dreams that felt like continuations of her near-death experience. In these dreams, she saw specific people and places, often accompanied by messages or warnings. Some of these dreams came true, further fueling her belief that she had been chosen for a divine purpose. But with her growing notoriety came darker forces. Jenna started receiving threats from those who saw her as a dangerous fanatic. Her home was vandalized, and she was followed by strangers who glared at her with unsettling intensity. One night, as she was driving home from a speaking engagement, she was nearly run off the road by a black SUV with no license plates. She became increasingly paranoid, certain that someone, or something, was trying to silence her. Jenna's health also began to deteriorate. She suffered from debilitating headaches, chest pains, and insomnia. Doctors couldn't find a physical cause, and some suggested that her symptoms were psychosomatic, a result of the stress she was under. But Jenna believed otherwise. "They don't want me to speak," she confided to David. "The darkness is fighting back." The final straw came during a televised interview where Jenna was asked to recount her experience. As she spoke, the studio lights flickered, and the air grew oppressively heavy. Suddenly, Jenna's voice faltered, and she clutched her chest, gasping for air. She collapsed on live television, and the broadcast was abruptly cut. Viewers were left in shock, and social media exploded with speculation. Jenna survived the incident but was left shaken. She retreated from public life, refusing to speak to anyone outside her immediate family. The visions continued, more vivid and disturbing than ever. She saw loved ones being taken in the rapture while others were left behind, their faces etched with sorrow and confusion. She saw herself standing at the edge of a great chasm, with angels on one side and demons on the other, each pulling her in opposite directions. One night, as she lay awake in bed, Jenna heard the voice again. It was softer this time, almost mournful. "You've done what you can," it said. "The choice is theirs now." Jenna wept, feeling both relieved and burdened. She had delivered the message, but whether it would make a difference was beyond her control. In the weeks that followed, she began to find a semblance of peace. She focused on her family, cherishing the time she had with them. But the weight of what she had seen never truly left her. The world continued as it always had, teetering between light and darkness, hope and despair. But for those who had heard Jenna's tale, the shadow of her vision lingered. They watched the skies, listened for the trumpet call, and wondered if the day she had warned them about was closer than they dared to imagine. The days after Jenna's passing were marked by a strange quiet, as if the world itself was pausing to consider the weight of her warnings. Those closest to her, her family, her friends, and even the people who had mocked her, found themselves haunted by her words. They couldn't ignore the conviction in her voice, the chilling detail of her visions, and the undeniable change she underwent after her near-death experience. Her daughter Emily, now an adult with children of her own, often reflected on her mother's journey. As a teenager, Emily had been embarrassed by the attention Jenna's message brought to their family. Yet, as time passed, she began to revisit the moments they'd shared, particularly Jenna's final years, and wondered if there had been truth in her warnings. Jenna's descriptions of the rapture, the trials of those left behind, and the fierce battle between light and darkness had once seemed far-fetched. But now, as Emily watched the world grow increasingly chaotic, her mother's words felt less like the ramblings of a distressed mind and more like a prophecy fulfilled. Emily's memories were not the only legacy Jenna left behind. Journals filled with her detailed accounts, dreams, and revelations surfaced in the years following her death. Some pages were written in a shaky hand, others with bold strokes that seemed almost frantic, as though she had written them in the grip of a vision. These journals were discovered by a local pastor, Reverend Michael Graves, who had been one of Jenna's early supporters. He believed the journals were a treasure trove of spiritual insight and worked to compile them into a book titled Voices Beyond the Veil. The book gained traction quickly. Within months, it became a bestseller, sparking heated debates across religious, scientific, and philosophical communities. Believers hailed it as a modern testament to divine intervention, while skeptics dismissed it as the product of a traumatized mind. However, even the skeptics had to admit the uncanny accuracy of some of Jenna's predictions. In her journals, she had written about political unrest, pandemics, and a growing sense of division among humanity. Though she never gave specific dates, her descriptions mirrored events unfolding in the present day. As voices beyond the veil circulated, people began sharing their own experiences with death and visions. Jenna's story inspired a wave of testimonies from individuals who claimed to have seen similar things: the light, the voice, the apocalyptic visions. These stories, shared online and in gatherings, formed a loose network of believers who called themselves the Watchers. They took Jenna's message to heart, committing themselves to lives of prayer, repentance, and preparation. The Watchers were not without controversy. Critics accused them of fear-mongering, spreading paranoia, and taking advantage of vulnerable people. Yet their movement continued to grow. They organized events, created support groups, and published literature aimed at helping others prepare for what they believed was the inevitable. Some members even sold their possessions and moved to remote locations, believing they could escape the chaos Jenna had described. Others focused on acts of service, spreading kindness and hope in a world they saw as increasingly bleak. In the midst of this cultural upheaval, Emily found herself drawn back to her childhood home. The house, now empty and quiet, was filled with memories of her mother. She spent hours going through boxes of photographs, letters, and trinkets, each item a piece of the puzzle that was Jenna's life. Among these mementos, Emily discovered a small locked chest she had never seen before. The key was nowhere to be found, but her curiosity got the better of her. After some effort, she managed to open it. Inside was a collection of cassette tapes, each labeled with a date and a brief description. The tapes appeared to be recordings Jenna had made during the height of her experiences. Emily found an old tape player and hesitated for a moment before pressing play. Her mother's voice, clear and filled with emotion, spilled into the room. "If you're listening to this," Jenna's voice said, "it means I'm no longer here. I pray that my words will reach you, whoever you are. I recorded these thoughts because I couldn't keep them bottled inside. The visions are relentless. They come in flashes during the day and in dreams at night. I feel as though I'm being shown pieces of a puzzle that I can't fully understand." As Emily listened to tape after tape, she felt a growing connection to her mother. Jenna spoke of her doubts, her fears, and the immense responsibility she felt. She also revealed details she had never shared publicly, including specific dates and events she believed would signal the beginning of the end. Some of these dates had already passed without incident, which made Emily wonder if her mother had been mistaken or if the events were yet to come. One tape stood out among the rest. In it, Jenna spoke directly to Emily. Her voice was softer, more intimate, as though she were sitting right beside her. "Emily, if you ever hear this, I want you to know how much I love you. I know my journey hasn't been easy for you. I know you've had your doubts, and I don't blame you. But please don't dismiss everything I've said. There's a reason you're hearing this now. You have a role to play, just as I did. Trust your heart and remember that no matter what happens, you are never alone." The message left Emily in tears. She felt a mix of guilt, love, and an unshakable sense of purpose. For the first time, she truly considered the possibility that her mother's experiences had been real. She decided to dig deeper into Jenna's writings and recordings, hoping to piece together the full story. Meanwhile, the world seemed to inch closer to the vision Jenna had described. Natural disasters became more frequent and severe, and political tensions escalated to dangerous levels. Strange phenomena were reported across the globe: unexplained lights in the sky, mysterious sounds that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, and mass animal die-offs. Scientists struggled to provide explanations and conspiracy theories ran rampant. Amid this growing uncertainty, the Watchers became a force to be reckoned with. Their gatherings swelled in size, drawing thousands of attendees. They held candlelight vigils, offered prayers for the world, and provided aid to communities in crisis. Their message was clear: the time to prepare was now. Emily, though hesitant to fully embrace the movement, found herself drawn to one of their events. She attended anonymously, sitting quietly in the back of a packed auditorium. The speaker that night was a man named Daniel Hayes, a former skeptic who had become one of the group's most passionate leaders. His words resonated deeply with Emily. "We don't claim to have all the answers," Daniel said, "but we do know this: something is coming. Whether you believe it's divine intervention, a shift in the Earth's balance, or something else entirely, the signs are all around us. We can choose to ignore them, to carry on as though nothing is wrong, or we can face the truth and prepare our hearts. The choice is ours. After the event, Emily approached Daniel and introduced herself. When she mentioned her connection to Jenna, his eyes lit up with recognition. "Your mother changed my life," he said. "Her story opened my eyes to things I never thought possible. I would be honored to hear your perspective." The two talked for hours, sharing their thoughts, doubts, and hopes. Emily felt an unexpected sense of comfort in Daniel's presence. He didn't pressure her to join the Watchers or adopt their beliefs, but he encouraged her to continue exploring her mother's legacy. Over the next several months, Emily became more involved in the movement. She began speaking at small gatherings, sharing her mother's story and her own journey of discovery. Though she still had doubts, she felt a growing sense of purpose. Her mother's words, both spoken and written, became a guiding force in her life. Then one night, Emily had a dream that changed everything. In the dream, she found herself standing in a vast, desolate landscape. The sky was a swirling mix of dark clouds and fiery red hues. She felt a presence behind her and turned to see her mother, bathed in light. Jenna's expression was both serene and urgent. "It's time," Jenna said, her voice echoing in the stillness. "You know what to do." Emily woke with a start, her heart pounding. She didn't fully understand the dream, but she felt compelled to act. She gathered her mother's journals, recordings, and personal belongings and began working on a comprehensive account of Jenna's life and message. She titled the project The Harbinger's Call and dedicated herself to sharing it with the world. As Emily worked tirelessly on the project, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered in her home, and she felt an unshakable sense of being watched. She started experiencing vivid dreams similar to those her mother had described. Though they terrified her, they also filled her with clarity and determination. When The Harbinger's Call was finally published, it caused an even greater stir than Jenna's original story. Emily's honest, heartfelt writing resonated with people from all walks of life. The book became a rallying point for the Watchers and others seeking guidance in an increasingly uncertain world. Through it all, Emily remained grounded, drawing strength from her mother's memory and the love they had shared. She didn't claim to have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. Jenna's message was one of hope, not fear. It was a call to live with purpose, compassion, and faith, no matter what the future held. And so Jenna's legacy lived on, a beacon of light in a world teetering on the edge of darkness. Her story, and Emily's continuation of it, reminded people that even in the face of the unknown, there was always hope and the power to choose how to face whatever lay ahead. The world was in flux. Jenna's warnings, once dismissed as the delusions of a traumatized woman, now echoed eerily across the globe. The signs she had spoken of, the unrest, the disasters, the feeling of an impending reckoning, were no longer confined to religious or spiritual circles. Scientists, politicians, and even skeptics began acknowledging an undeniable shift in the fabric of the world. Emily Matthews found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant figurehead for a growing movement of those seeking to understand, prepare for, or simply survive what was to come. Emily never expected to become the voice of her mother's message. She had stepped into the role out of love and duty, determined to honor Jenna's legacy and find her own answers along the way. But as the years passed, Emily's work took on a momentum of its own. She became a bridge between faith and science, belief and skepticism, uniting people in their shared desire to make sense of the chaos. Her late mother's journals and recordings continued to yield new insights, and Emily spent countless nights poring over them, searching for patterns, hidden meanings, or anything that might offer guidance. One discovery stood out among the rest: a series of symbols Jenna had repeatedly drawn in her journals. They appeared alongside her most intense visions, usually in the margins or scrawled hastily at the bottom of a page. The symbols were intricate, a combination of geometric shapes and flowing lines that seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Emily felt drawn to them, though she didn't understand their meaning. Determined to uncover their significance, she reached out to experts in various fields: linguists, historians, mathematicians, and even cryptographers. To Emily's surprise, the symbols defied easy categorization. They bore similarities to ancient languages, sacred geometry, and even quantum mechanics, but no one could definitively say what they were. Some suggested they were a form of divine communication, a universal language meant to convey truths beyond human comprehension. Others speculated that they represented a kind of map, perhaps a spiritual or metaphysical guide to navigating the coming trials. One scholar, Dr. Annika Verma, offered a particularly intriguing theory. These symbols might not be meant to be read or interpreted in the traditional sense, she told Emily during a late-night video call. They could be activators, visual keys designed to awaken something within the observer. Your mother may have been given these symbols as a way to prepare humanity, not just intellectually, but spiritually. The idea fascinated Emily. She began incorporating the symbols into her work, sharing them at public events and through social media. People responded in unexpected ways. Some reported feeling a sense of peace or clarity when they looked at the symbols, while others described vivid dreams or sudden flashes of insight. A few claimed to have seen the symbols before, in their own visions, dreams, or moments of crisis. The watchers embraced the symbols as sacred, weaving them into their gatherings and rituals. They painted them on banners, carved them into wood, and even tattooed them onto their bodies. The symbols became a unifying emblem, a reminder that amidst the uncertainty, there was a purpose and a plan. But not everyone welcomed Emily's work. As her influence grew, so did the resistance. Powerful voices in media, government, and academia denounced her as a charlatan, a fearmonger, or worse. Conspiracy theories swirled, accusing her of everything from staging her mother's experiences to being part of a shadowy agenda to manipulate the masses. Emily tried to ignore the noise, focusing instead on the people who found solace and strength in her message. The opposition reached a fever pitch when an anonymous hacker leaked thousands of private emails, messages, and files from Emily's computer. The leak was a devastating invasion of privacy, but it also backfired in unexpected ways. While critics seized on out-of-context snippets to discredit her, many people were struck by the authenticity and vulnerability revealed in her communications. Emily's doubts, fears, and unwavering commitment to her mother's message were laid bare, humanizing her in the eyes of the public. In the wake of the leak, Emily received an invitation she couldn't ignore, an offer to speak at a global summit on existential risk. The summit, held in Geneva, brought together leaders, scientists, philosophers, and spiritual figures to discuss the pressing challenges facing humanity. Emily hesitated at first, unsure if her message would be welcomed in such a high-profile, intellectually rigorous setting. But she ultimately accepted, feeling that her mother's voice deserved to be heard on the world stage. The summit was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. The discussions ranged from climate change to artificial intelligence, nuclear proliferation to pandemics. Emily's presentation was scheduled for the final day, a coveted but daunting spot. When she stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. "My mother's message wasn't about fear," she began, her voice steady but emotional. "It was about hope. Hope that we can face the challenges ahead with courage, compassion, and faith." She believed that the trials we face are not punishments, but opportunities to grow, to become the people we were always meant to be. Emily shared Jenna's story, her own journey, and the symbols that had captured the imagination of so many. She didn't claim to have all the answers, but she urged the audience to consider the possibility that humanity's greatest challenges required more than technological solutions. "We must prepare not just our minds and our bodies, but our souls," she said. "If we face these trials together with love and understanding, I believe we can emerge stronger." Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation and sparking conversations that continued long after the summit ended. But the impact of her message wasn't confined to the conference halls. In the weeks that followed, Emily received letters, emails, and calls from people around the world. Some shared their own stories of near-death experiences or visions. Others expressed gratitude for the hope and clarity her message had brought them. Yet even as Emily's influence grew, the world's turmoil deepened. The disasters Jenna had foreseen became more frequent and intense. Unexplained phenomena, once dismissed as isolated anomalies, became impossible to ignore. Strange lights in the sky were reported in cities across the globe, accompanied by eerie sounds that defied explanation. Crops failed in unexpected ways, and entire ecosystems began to collapse. The sense of an impending reckoning was palpable. Emily felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. Despite her efforts to stay strong, she often doubted herself, wondering if she was truly the right person to carry her mother's message. During one particularly dark night, she found herself alone in her home, staring at one of the symbols Jenna had drawn. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Mom, I don't know if I can do this." In that moment, Emily felt a warmth envelop her, as though someone had draped a comforting blanket over her shoulders. She didn't see anything, but she heard a familiar voice in her mind. "You're not alone, Emily. You've never been alone." The experience renewed her resolve. Emily threw herself into her work with renewed energy, collaborating with scientists, theologians, and community leaders to explore the intersection of faith, science, and humanity's collective future. She organized a series of global events called The Gathering, where people from all walks of life could come together to share their stories, learn from one another, and prepare for whatever lay ahead. The gatherings became a phenomenon, attracting millions of participants both in person and online. They featured speakers, workshops, and rituals centered on unity, resilience, and spiritual growth. The symbols Jenna had drawn took on new significance, inspiring art, music, and poetry that celebrated the beauty and mystery of the human spirit. As the years passed, Emily's work continued to evolve. She became less focused on predicting the future and more committed to helping people live meaningful lives in the present. The rapture isn't just a moment in time, she often said. It's a process of awakening, a call to become the best versions of ourselves. Though the world remained a turbulent and unpredictable place, Emily's message offered a beacon of hope. People who had once lived in fear began to find strength in their communities, their faith, and their shared humanity. And while not everyone believed in Jenna's visions, few could deny the transformative power of the story she had left behind. As Emily continued her mission, she began noticing something remarkable happening among those who engaged deeply with her mother's message and the symbols. Individuals and communities began reporting subtle, almost imperceptible changes in their daily lives. People who had once been consumed by fear or bitterness found themselves growing more compassionate, forgiving, and hopeful. Small acts of kindness multiplied, creating ripples that spread far beyond their origins. Emily started receiving testimonials from people across the globe. A man in Japan shared how the symbols had inspired him to reconcile with his estranged brother after years of silence. A woman in Brazil described a dream where the symbols guided her to help a struggling neighbor, an act that blossomed into a thriving community garden. These stories, though deeply personal, revealed a collective awakening, a sense of interconnectedness and purpose that transcended cultural, religious, and geographic boundaries. Even skeptics found themselves drawn to the transformative power of the symbols in the gathering. Many admitted they didn't fully believe in Jenna's visions or Emily's interpretation of them, but they couldn't deny the positive impact her work was having. The gatherings became a rare space where people with differing beliefs could come together and find common ground. Scientists debated with theologians, artists collaborated with engineers, and families healed old wounds. What began as a movement of preparation for the unknown had evolved into a celebration of humanity's shared potential. Emily herself experienced a profound personal transformation. Though her journey had begun in doubt and obligation, she now carried her mother's message with a sense of joy and gratitude. She no longer feared the future, no matter how uncertain or daunting it might be. Instead, she embraced each day as an opportunity to inspire and be inspired. Her work, once rooted in her mother's singular experience, had become a global testament to the resilience and beauty of the human spirit. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a woman returning from death with a rapture message? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.